In the spring of 1912, two mining companies made an astonishing discovery in a Nevada cave. What they found challenged long-held beliefs about history and anthropology. For a significant period, access to this cave was strictly controlled, with only a select few allowed inside. This secrecy sparked questions. What was inside the cave? What was being hidden? And why was the public kept in the dark? Eventually, details of the discovery emerged, revealing something that defied conventional understanding. What was found in the cave shouldn't have existed, calling into question everything we thought we knew about human origins. This is the story of Lovelock Cave and the mysterious giant skeletal remains uncovered within it. John T. Reed eventually became one of the individuals who investigated stories about giants, but his introduction to these tales happened earlier in his life, around 1886. Reed recounted one of his first encounters with the Indian caves. At the time, he worked as a clerk for his father and was tasked with finding some missing horses. He set out with local Paiute tribesmen to track down the animals. After a fruitless day of searching, they camped for the night. On the second day, heavy rain began, and Reed suggested taking shelter in some nearby caves. However, the Paiute tribesmen rejected the idea, saying they were afraid of evil spirits in the caves. Reed didn't take the mention of evil spirits seriously, but became intrigued by the caves. While they continued their search, Reed, who was around 15 years old, noticed arrow marks and broken arrow tips near the cave entrance. He asked his companion, Natchez, about their origin. Natchez shared an unusual story. He explained that, long ago, a red-haired tribe of very tall men had arrived in the area from the southwest. These strange, giant beings were known as the Siteka, meaning eaters of tule. Tule is a fibrous water plant that the Siteka used both as food and to construct their boats. The Siteka tribe came from a region near the Pitt River and had a culture that stood out from other Native American groups. They built homes on some of their boats and were unfriendly toward others. Known for their great height, they intimidated neighboring tribes, who were much smaller. Conflict soon arose between the Paiutes and the giants, who were described as cruel and, in some accounts, cannibals. Stories claim the red-haired giants instilled great fear in other tribes, and captured prisoners of war faced horrific fates, either being killed in brutal ways or eaten. As fear spread, the Paiutes joined forces with neighboring tribes to fight the giants. A large battle broke out, leading to heavy losses on both sides. However, the united tribes eventually gained the advantage. Realizing their defeat, some of the giants fled by boat, but they were ambushed during their escape. While a few managed to survive and attempted to settle further west, their reputation had already preceded them. Locals in the new area attacked them, forcing the remaining giants to retreat back across the Pitt River. Many others, unable to escape by boat, sought refuge in a cave. Determined to end the threat, the Paiutes blocked the cave entrance and set fire to dry hay and sagebrush, throwing them into the cave. The smoke and flames suffocated the giants, putting an end to their terror and bringing peace to the tribes. By the next morning, Reed was taken into the cave, where he came across a large pile of guano, which is bat feces. He was disappointed with what he saw inside the cave, but his interest in it returned years later. Just before Reed learned about the Paiutes and the Siteka tribe, Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, the daughter of Indian Chief Hopkins and sister of Natchez, confirmed the truth behind these stories. 3 years earlier, she had published a book about the Paiutes' history and their encounters with their giant, unfriendly neighbors. She also owned a dress she had made from the red hair of some of these giants, which served as proof of her interactions with them. Many religious and cultural traditions agree that humans, as we know them, were not the only species to inhabit the earth. The Old Testament mentions giants born from unions between women and fallen angels, while the Vedas speak of large, revered beings. According to the story of the Siteka's origins, as told to Reed, the Creator made both the Siteka and the Paiutes. At that time, the Paiutes, also called the Numa, spoke the same language as the red-haired giants. However, Conflicts eventually arose between the two tribes. In an effort to end their disputes, the Creator separated them. He sent the Siteka to the Humboldt Sink and moved the Numa to the Carson Sink. Despite assigning each tribe to a different area, the Creator was saddened by their ongoing conflict. In his grief, he walked to Walker Lake, placed his head on a rock, and wept. It is believed that his tears created a large river, and the rock where he rested his head still bears the impression of his forehead. When Reed grew up and became a mining engineer, he found himself drawn back to Lovelock Cave. Organizing an expedition of the scale required was expensive, and he lacked the necessary funds. However, by 1911, Lovelock Cave began attracting attention for commercial purposes. Large deposits of guano, used for producing fertilizer and gunpowder, had been discovered in the cave. Reed recalled his first visit to the cave as a 15-year-old and the vast amount of guano he had seen. He started reaching out to potential buyers interested in extracting the guano, but most declined his offers. Eventually, he secured a deal with two individuals. Between 1911 and 1912, mining engineers David Pugh and James Hart assembled a team to extract the guano from Lovelock Cave. As they worked on removing large amounts of guano, something unexpected was discovered. After months of mining and transporting the guano to fertilizer companies, the upper layers of soil in the cave were depleted. It was then that the team unearthed skeletal remains buried just a few meters deep. These remains stood out because they measured between 7 and 8 feet tall. Over 60 skeletal remains of unusual height were reportedly discovered at the site. Along with these, other notable finds included a large sandal sample and a giant-sized fingerprint found in the cave. However, Hart and his team, lacking expertise in handling archaeological artifacts, ended up losing some of the items they had discovered. To ensure the findings were preserved, they contacted Dr. J.C. Merriam from the University of California for assistance. Merriam, in turn, reached out to the University of Nevada for support. Hart also approached the Smithsonian Institution to discuss their discoveries and possibly sell some of the artifacts. The Smithsonian declined, explaining that they only accepted donations and did not purchase historical remains. The University of Nevada stepped in and sent Dr. Loud to investigate the miners' discoveries. Underneath the guano layer, Dr. Loud uncovered mummified remains of what appeared to be a man with a rope tied around his neck. Additionally, 4 female remains were also found. These findings led to further searches over the years, resulting in the discovery of more skeletal remains and artifacts that could shed light on the past. Although Reed did not mine guano, he focused on his mining enterprise while obsessively documenting everything he could about the early settlers. He conducted numerous interviews as the number of artifacts grew. This task seemed easier for him since the natives trusted him. Reed and his father had previously worked in the community, and the locals considered him a friend. It also seemed that he wanted the stories he had heard as a boy to be true. As more artifacts were discovered, an exhibition center called the Lovelock exhibit was established. The items were displayed in a shed for interested visitors. Unfortunately, the shed was mysteriously burned down. This made me wonder if Lovelock was unique, so I started investigating. What I found was fascinating. As I looked into Reed's discoveries and interests at Lovelock Cave, I realized this wasn't the only location with skeletal remains. The Serpent Mound in Ohio is another intriguing site. Like Lovelock, bones discovered here were sometimes up to 8 feet long. In some cases, the remains disintegrated into dust upon exposure to air. As discoveries of unusual skeletal remains were being made across the nation, another amateur explorer, Ralph Glidden, was digging around Catalina Island. Between 1911 and 1930, it's estimated that Glidden uncovered as many as 3,781 skeletons on the island. Within 2 centuries, over 1,000 reports of skeletons measuring at least 7 feet tall have been documented. Most of these discoveries were sent to one place, established to preserve such finds. However, this institution, tasked with safeguarding these important remains, soon began acting in ways that raised suspicion. as America uncovered evidence suggesting the presence of an earlier race and civilization. The items were sent to the Smithsonian Institute. The Smithsonian is one of the largest collectors of ancient relics, and it claims to help shape our understanding of civilization. Oddly, despite most of the findings being carefully transported to the Institute, some seem to vanish over time. A curious situation indeed. When geologists sought clarification and requested access to inspect some of the items, they were denied by the Smithsonian. The Institute gave strange explanations, claiming that some discoveries were unreliable, while others had gone missing, although they admitted receiving them initially. The Smithsonian Institute has often been criticized for its lack of transparency. This stems from a belief the Institute holds, that civilizations develop independently. Essentially, it suggests that civilizations rise and fall based on the actions of their own people, with no significant migrations or mixing. According to this view, people from Asia remained in Asia, and people from Africa stayed in Africa, with no large-scale movement of populations. However, discoveries like skeletal remains, writings, and artifacts from places like Lovelock Cave contradict this idea. These findings point to evidence of movement, suggesting that there were people in America before the commonly accepted history tells us. The Smithsonian Institute rejects these findings because they challenge long-held beliefs. In fact, the Institute has a history of withholding resources from those seeking answers. For instance, in 1909, two explorers, G.E. Kincaid and Professor D.S. Jordan, uncovered remarkable items in a cave in the Grand Canyon. Initially, the Institute provided funding for their expedition, but when the explorers requested additional funds after finding even more significant discoveries, their request was denied. This was just one of many troubling incidents involving the Institute, and it would be only the beginning of their challenges. More details about what happened to Kincaid and Jordan will come later. After the discovery of the skeletal remains at Lovelock Cave, many questions have arisen. One of the most notable is why traces of giants seem to have vanished from our world. Did the Sea-Teka tribe, known for its size, completely die off? Some stories suggest that there were survivors after the battle with the Paiutes, and some of them even returned to the area they are believed to have come from. If that's true, why don't we see giants today? What about the red-haired people who are said to have descended from the Sea-Teka tribe? Could they still exist, but are deliberately hidden from the public? Descriptions of these giants portray them as a superior race with immense strength, possible immunity to diseases, and advanced knowledge. In some caves, explorers or miners have found decoy ducks, suggesting these giants knew how to hunt ducks. The Paiutes also mention that, unlike other Indian tribes who ate their food raw or semi-cooked, the giants had mastered the art of cooking and roasting. This indicates that the giants possessed advanced intelligence and skills, making them better equipped to survive. If some of them survived, why hasn't the scientific community been able to trace their descendants? It's worth noting that this mystery began in Nevada, the same state home to the enigmatic Area 51. Could there be preserved samples or even secret breeding grounds for these superhumans that the world knows nothing about? These are just questions that one might consider. When we think about the destruction of many of these samples during the mining efforts of Pugh and his team, as soon as they were exposed to the atmosphere, we realize a limitation. Incidents like this make it hard to study the properties of the findings. How genuine were they? Could they have been fraudulently placed in these caves and other locations? There have been cases where supposed discoveries turned out to be fake. What about the images flooding the internet? Our world is filled with content creators willing to do anything for social media engagement. In 2002, a Photoshop contest led to the internet being flooded with images like this. These and other convincing photos suggested the discovery of archaeological items, but they also dilute the authenticity of any claims about skeletal remains found. From a scientific perspective, it's medically impossible for humans to exist as giants. The human skeletal frame is designed to hold only specific volumes. When body mass increases, the volume increases exponentially, and the skeleton must support this large volume. This is practically impossible because bones may break down if such growth ever occurred. That being said, we can't completely rule out the possibility of giants. The Guinness Book of Records lists the tallest people on Earth, including Sultan Kusin from Turkey and Suleymana Abdul Samed from Ghana, both of whom stand well over 9 feet tall. However, these individuals do not match the description of the powerful militia giants whose remains are found in Lovelock Cave. People like Suleymana and Sultan have gigantism, a condition that causes excessive growth. This should not be confused with the giants in this video. Gigantism occurs due to an overproduction of adenoma in the pituitary gland. Those affected by this condition face numerous challenges, as the abnormal growth can put pressure on their organs, often leading to a shorter lifespan. While the NBA has shown that extremely tall people can be athletic, making it possible for them to lead active lives, there are also cases of people with unusually long limbs or hands. If the remains of such individuals are discovered years later, they might be classified as giants. But who says giants were just ordinary people? Some skeletal remains found in the past had 2 sets of teeth, and their bones were much thicker than typical human bones. This suggests they were not like ordinary humans. Sarah's claim of receiving a dress from the giants remains unproven. In a recovered manuscript that includes an interview with Reed and a local person who claimed to have seen the dress, Reed admitted that he never knew how Sarah came by it or what happened to it afterward. He explained that they weren't naturally inquisitive and didn't ask her about it. While it's tempting to question whether Sarah had a reason to fabricate such a story, I also remember that she wrote a book about her people. Could the tale of receiving a red-haired dress have been a publicity stunt? The giants' portrayal varies. Some people who learned of the giants through oral tradition confirm the giants had red hair, while others disagree. Similarly, while some describe them as fearsome man-eaters, a story from a young Paiute contradicts this. This boy once faced the giants by the sea, where they captured him in large numbers. They took him to their camp, where he was hung upside down for a time. But things changed. The boy later said he was released and stayed with a family for a couple of days, then transferred to another family for 2 more days. Afterward, he was returned to his people and gifted a dog, which the Paiutes, who didn't keep dogs, appreciated. So, what's the truth? Do we believe the terrifying accounts of cannibalistic giants, or the story of a group of towering humans who kept to themselves? These differing accounts complicate the search for the truth. Each new discovery brings us closer to understanding our past. As these discoveries continue to surface, the mystery surrounding the giants only deepens. The ongoing struggle between preserving historical artifacts and maintaining the established narratives of history raises questions about what truths are being hidden. The Smithsonian Institute's refusal to provide access to certain findings has only fueled suspicions that there are larger, untold stories about the giants and their civilization. This reluctance to share information leaves many to wonder if there is a concerted effort to suppress these findings in favor of maintaining a particular version of history. The accounts from local tribes, like the Paiutes, who mention interactions with these giants, also provide conflicting stories. While some portray the giants as violent and cannibalistic, others describe them as having more complex and perhaps even peaceful relationships with certain groups of people. These contradictions make it even more challenging to separate fact from folklore. Could there have been a real race of giants who once inhabited North America, only to disappear or be wiped out due to conflicts, diseases, or other forces of nature? With each new excavation, new theories emerge about who these giants were, where they came from, and why they vanished. But as long as access to vital evidence remains restricted and official narratives remain steadfast, the true story of the giants may never be fully uncovered. The questions persist, and the search for answers continues. Will we ever know the full truth about these enigmatic giants, or will they remain a shadow in the depths of history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more.